you'll have seen in the last 24 hours that Shamima Begum lost her Court of Appeal challenge over the removal of her British citizenship after claiming she was a victim of trafficking. Her lawyers vowed to keep fighting until she is, and I quote, safely back home. You'll remember Ms. Begum travelled to Syria to join ISIS in 2015. She was aged 15 at the time. Her citizenship was revoked on national security grounds shortly after she was found in a Syrian refugee camp in February 2019. This is not the first time that she has lost a challenge against the decision at the Special Immigration Appeals Commission. And this was the Court of Appeal ruling after that judgment. And that also said that the removal of her citizenship was lawful. Well, is she a victim or is she a villain? That's where this case seems to hinge. And to answer that question, the political commentator Jonathon Lis joins me live on the line. Morning to you, Jonathan.
Morning, Cristo.
So is she a victim or is she a villain?
Well, look, I mean, questions about people being a villain are questions, you know, not of morality, but of the law. And she has to be convicted of a crime if we are to view her as a criminal. And in order for her to be convicted of a crime, she has to stand trial. And in order for her to stand trial, she has to come to the United Kingdom. But she's not allowed to do that because the government has effectively rendered her stateless and made her someone else's problem, even though whatever you think of her, she is British made, she's British problem, if you like. She's a problem for Britain to deal with. We have enough to say when other countries leave us to deal with people they don't want. When we urgently try to support them, it is absolutely right that Britain should take her in, force her to stand trial if it considers that she has committed a crime, and then she must suffer the consequences. The fundamental point here, Cristo, is that she might be a victim and a villain. These are not sort of binary questions.
Okay, I see the logic of your position in her coming here and it being our problem and us dealing with her and us getting the intelligence out of her that might help matters. But someone doesn't need to be convicted of a crime in order to be a national security threat. And surely the courts here and the Home Secretary have thought, well, on balance, the benefit we would get from having her here does not outweigh the threat to national security that she may create. And so on balance, it's better to keep her away because of that national security threat. Don't you understand that logic?
I think it's a very, very silly and very specious argument that a young woman who is kept safely in jail if she's considered to be a security threat while awaiting trial, and then kept in jail after she's convicted, could be considered a national security threat. We're a big country, a grown-up country. We have a lot of very dangerous people in this country, and we seem to manage just fine by dealing with them by appropriate due process. If someone is considered a threat and they're either monitored by the security services, they're arrested, and they're kept in secure locations. We have laws for this purpose exactly. The idea that she couldn't even be allowed on a secure plane to be escorted to this country to then stand trial under due process because she's a national security threat is completely preposterous, and it really insults the intelligence of anyone to make that case to them, because it's clearly not true. The Home Secretary considered that because Shamima Begum might have had access to Bangladeshi citizenship, although that was disputed by Bangladesh, it could therefore strip its citizenship from her. This is not a question about whether you agree with Shamima Begum, whether you support her or anything like that. It's simply a question about whether the British government can strip citizenship from someone that it doesn't like, can render someone stateless. I think that is a very, very dangerous question.
You can't argue a lack of due process when now various separate courts have declared that the national security threat argument was lawful. Now, they don't have any skin in the game. They're not biased against it. They're looking at what is lawful and what isn't. And
They're
they
not
have
saying
decided that so there has been a level of due process.
The court has not upheld any issue of whether she's a national security threat or not. It has simply upheld the ability of the Home Secretary to make that ruling. The Court of Appeal didn't say that Shamima Begum was a security threat to Britain.
No, but they said it was lawful what the Home Secretary did.
It said it was lawful. It said it was lawful for the Home Secretary to make what might be an unjust decision. It was saying that it wasn't an illegal decision, but it might have been an unjust decision. That's the fundamental point here. I'm not actually interested in the Court of Appeal's verdict. It's not saying about whether this is fair or not. It's saying whether it was in the law.
But the
Home Secretary has the right to do that. The Home Secretary might have the right to do that, Cristo. I'm not a lawyer. If the Court of Appeal says the Home Secretary had the right to do that legally, to make what was a very unjust decision, then that's fine. That's the law. But it doesn't mean that the decision wasn't unjust, and that's what I'm talking about right now.
Well, and that is an opinion that other people also may well hold. But there are going to be people listening to this saying this is exactly the role of a Home Secretary. That if someone is deemed to be a national security threat, if someone is deemed to be dangerous to be brought back here, it might seem unjust. It might seem on paper to be unfair, but actually the security of the United Kingdom is more important than what might seem fair. What would you say to that?
I simply reiterate the point that I just made, that clearly, if you consider someone to be a national security threat, there are ways of dealing with that rather than leaving them to rot for the rest of their lives in a Syrian refugee camp. Whether you like it or not, she is British born. She grew up in Britain. Any problem, any radicalization that might have happened in Britain. She is Britain's responsibility, in the same way that the same people fuming about her would agree it was someone else's responsibility if she'd grown up in a different country and been radicalized in that country and somehow ended up in Britain. They would say, well, she shouldn't be in Britain. She should be deported to the place that she's from, so she can stand trial there, so that country can be responsible for her. We are washing our hands of a problem that we don't like. I think it's completely unfair. And her child was entitled to British citizenship as well, and we left that child to basically die in a refugee camp. And that was a deeply shameful moment. That child was not guilty of anything. The British government did absolutely nothing to try and save that child. Look, the fundamental point, Cristo, was that she was a groomed child. She was 15 years old. Now, that's not to say she can't be guilty of a crime, but we wouldn't sort of deal with this, an issue of this nature, in any other way, I think.
That's an interesting point that you bring up, because where I think the issue lies with this is you're quite right. I actually agree that she was a groomed child. I think that the thing that lets down that argument, and the thing that adds validity to the argument of her being a security threat, is well beyond her years as a child. As an adult, she has made comments that could very easily be considered to be a national security threat, where she's said that she was essentially okay with beheadings and executions, that she saw the killing of women and children, especially in reference to the Manchester terror attack, that in a way sort of retaliation or self-defense, a kind of retaliation, she said. Their justification was that it was retaliation, so I thought, okay, that's a fair justification. There have been a litany of comments she's made as an adult that are very, very dodgy at the very least. A security threat, I think, at the very least. And so isn't that the issue here? It's not just that she was groomed as a child, it's that she's made these sorts of abhorrent and, I think, threatening comments as an adult.
Well, I think that she's also made a series of extremely contrite comments in recent years. Look, again, I reiterate, I'm not here to defend Shamima Begum. I've never met her. I think what she did was right, but I think that she is entitled to British citizenship, and she's entitled to stand trial in front of a jury of her peers as any other British citizen would be. That's the fundamental point. I'm not here to say what about whether her comments about this issue or that issue were
No, but
justified.
if your
But I
argument
don't think
is,
that anyone else should
Jonathan,
have. A lot of people with very
if your argument is, though, that it's an unjust decision regarding her national security status and her being a threat, surely her having made comments as an adult that are clearly threatening to national security, that makes it not unjust. That makes it justified.
No, I'm saying, look, Cristo, the appropriate place to have this conversation is in a court of law. That is what we can have. We can litigate this argument. It won't change anything. Shamima Begum was entitled to have a defence. That too can't happen at the moment because she's not allowed to come to the United Kingdom to face a jury of her peers and make those arguments in her defence. We know that she was a groomed child. She was 15 years old. She's been afforded absolutely no leeway or compassion whatever by the British state for that. She has obviously done a lot of things that are very, very bad. I'm not saying that she shouldn't face justice for any of those things or that she should be exempted from facing justice on account of being a groomed child, but I'm saying it does feed into the mix. I'm also saying that despite a lot of those comments, I think that she has been very contrite over the last couple of years.
I think you made that point, Jonathan. Thank you. That's Jonathon Lis, the political commentator. Tony from Cardiff says that she's a threat. Lots of people saying this as well. What about the rights of my security as well? A lot of people being very angry about that. Though Jason says that Jonathon Lis sums it all up brilliantly.